after the Hamas attack that shocked the world. The Israel army imposed a total blockade on the Gaza Strip, depriving it of food, water, medicine and fuel, with the airstrikes that followed. Gaza City and its environs have been bombarded by a barrage of bombs. On October 11th, Israel warplanes struck Gaza's only power plant. Severely damaged, the plant began to run on fuel only. Egypt tried to refuel Gaza through the Rafah border crossing, but the attempt failed after Israel forces bombarded the Rafah border crossing. In the early morning of October 13th, a group of Israeli army soldiers entered Gaza in an attempt to rescue hostages kidnapped by Hamas. However, facing fierce resistance from Hamas forces, the Israeli forces were forced to cancel the operation and withdraw. The Israel government has announced that it will launch a major airstrike in northern Gaza, addressing the civilian population of around 1 million people, and advised them to head south to avoid harm. But Hamas, speaking on behalf of the civilians, that no one would leave their place. At midnight on October 14th, Israel warplanes launched an airstrike on northern Gaza, destroying schools, hospitals, mosques, shelters and many other civilian settlements, killing two senior Hamas leaders. On the morning of October 15th, Netanyahu made a statement. He demanded the evacuation of 21 hospitals in northern Gaza, where he claimed Hamas forces were hiding, and announced that all of them would be hit shortly. He also announced that they would start a ground operation in Gaza in a short time. Following these announcements, around 1 million Palestinians moved southward to the city of Khan Younis. On the evening of October 17th, Israel warplanes targeted Al Ali Hospital in the Gaza Strip. Nearly 500 innocent civilians, mostly children, were killed in this attack. Before humanity could recover from the shock of this attack, Israel warplanes struck the Church of St. Porphyrius, where civilians had taken refuge, killing nearly 50 civilians. On the night of October 22nd, Israel's special forces to rescue hostages held by Hamas Khan Younis city in a sudden raid, however. In this failed operation that lasted only 2 hours, 2 armored vehicles and 1 tank were destroyed, and the Israeli forces, who suffered nearly 10 casualties, were forced to retreat. The next day, the Al-Qassam brigades, Israel launched a rocket attack on a police station in Erez, killing 5 Israel policemen. In retaliation, Israel targeted Nusayrat refugee camp in Gaza and Al-Shifa hospital, the largest hospital in Gaza, killing 21 civilians. October 28th, the Israeli army began its occupation of the Gaza Strip, with a large-scale ground invasion of the towns of Beit Hanun and Jua. After nearly 3 days of clashes between Hamas and Israel forces, on November 2nd, both towns fell under Israel control. On the same day, the Israel army began an all-out crossing of the Gaza Strip, tightening the siege. When news channels reported that the anticipated ground operation had begun, Netanyahu steadfastly denied it. As Israel troops marched step by step through the streets of Gaza, they encountered fierce resistance, one by one. Hamas forces began hunting down Israeli tanks that entered the city through large underground tunnels. On November 2nd, 3 Israeli tanks were destroyed by Hamas forces. The battalion's commander, Lieutenant Colonel Salman Habaka, was killed in the fighting. Habaka is the most senior Israel officer to be killed since October 27th, when Israel launched ground operations in the Gaza Strip. The guerrilla-style warfare practiced by Hamas was proving very difficult for Israel forces. Israeli commanders said there were minefields and booby traps all over the city. He admitted that Hamas was well prepared for the war. Israel planes during the night of November 2nd. The ground troops continued their advance while bombarding Gaza City. That night, Israel lost 15 soldiers and Hamas lost more than 100 fighters in the fighting in Gaza. At dawn the following day, the Israel armed forces launched an operation to clear the areas under their control. and to blow up the tunnels. During this operation, there were fierce clashes between the Israeli army and thousands of Hamas fighters in the tunnels. In the morning hours of November 3rd, after dozens of attacks from land, air and sea, the Israel army succeeded in cutting the Gaza Strip in half. Gaza city center was completely besieged from the north and south. Officials said they would ensure safe passage for civilians seeking to flee south from the fighting. But an Israeli missile struck an ambulance convoy carrying the wounded heading towards the Rafah border crossing. Dozens of civilians were killed in this brutal attack. In front of the eyes of the whole world, on the same day, a school in northern Gaza was bombed. Nearly 50 innocent civilians lost their lives. By nightfall, the Israel army, it advanced along the coastal strip of northern Gaza and took control of the area, up to the northern border of the Nasser neighborhood. However, after dark, Hamas forces emerged from the tunnels and managed to push the Israel soldiers back as far as Beit Lahia, following fierce clashes throughout the night. 12 Israeli soldiers and 133 Hamas fighters were killed. Israel warplanes continued their relentless bombardment of Gaza City. On the morning of November 4th, the Israel army bombarded. He attempted to infiltrate the Jabalia refugee camp. After a clash with Hamas forces, Israeli soldiers were forced to retreat. During this withdrawal, 5 Israeli soldiers lost their lives. Spokesman for the Al-Qassam brigades, he stated that they are in a superior position on many fronts, including northwest of the Gaza Strip, south of Gaza City, Beit Hanun and northeast of the Gaza. Said they destroyed 24 military vehicles, including armored personnel carriers and armored bulldozers. On the evening of November 4th, as darkness fell, the Israel army attacked again from the northern coastline, advancing as far as the town of Nasser, where it managed to hold on. Al-Qassam responded by firing 50 rockets at the town of Zikim. They then tried to infiltrate the city from the sea, but were repulsed by the Israel Navy. In an air campaign that began after dark, planes bombed the El-Meghazi refugee camp in central Gaza, killing 40 people, mostly children. On the morning of November 5th, Hamas ambushed Israeli forces trying to enter Jabalia from Beit Hanun. 2 Israel tanks and 8 Israel soldiers were killed. Israel troops trying to enter the center from the south of Gaza City were ambushed by Hamas forces, killing 10 Israel soldiers in the ambush. In addition, the Al-Qassam brigades fired rockets from Gaza in succession, hitting 11 Israel towns. US Secretary of State Blinken, at noon on November 5th, he met with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas to discuss humanitarian aid to Gaza. During this meeting, Netanyahu appeared in front of the cameras and responded to calls for a ceasefire by saying, "We are moving forward. Nothing will stop you. We will completely destroy Hamas rule in Gaza." Unable to advance from the south of Gaza towards the city center, Israel forces changed direction and moved southward towards the evening. Israel forces took control of the neighborhoods of Al-Zara and Al-Mughrakir. This was an important step for the Israel army to prevent attacks from Nusayrat camp. On November 6th, the Israeli army announced that it had captured the area up to Hamd Hospital in the north. In this operation, 1 Israel tank was destroyed by the Qassam army, while 3 Israel soldiers were killed. At 2 p.m., Israel ordered all troops to enter the center of Gaza City, and the southern troops were the first to follow this order and advance. In the Tel Al-Hawa neighborhood, it faced a fierce defense by Hamas forces. In the hours-long clash, the Israeli troops were unable to break through the Hamas forces and suffered many casualties, forcing them to retreat. It is faster along Israel's northern coastline. The neighborhood of Raimel came under the control of the Israeli army. The bombardment of Gaza from the sea had a great impact. Israeli forces managed to advance on all fronts until the evening hours is very close to entering the city center. On November 7th, in the morning hours, Several Israeli troops managed to reach the city center, but were forced to retreat in the face of fierce resistance from Hamas forces. On November 8th, Israel sources that the army has reached the center of Gaza. Local sources rejected this claim. Since the start of the ground offensive, the Israel army says it has lost 39 soldiers, 6 tanks and 30 armored vehicles, while Hamas has lost over 300 since the October 7th attack. The total loss of life in Palestine is over 10,000.